Hello and welcome to the 1912 Exiles podcast, the original, the biggest and the best Newport County podcast made by the fans for the fans. I'm Ed, and with the rest of the crew gorging themselves on leftover turkey and tubs of celebrations, I have cast the net wide to gather a panel of experts to pick through County's most recent games. I'll introduce them in a second, but I hope that in the meantime you have all had a restful and restorative Christmas break, and that 2025 brings you health, wealth and happiness. And thank you for your continued support of the podcast, which is of course brought to you in association with the Terrace Media Network and the Riverside Sports Bar, the home of sports fans in Newport. Now, due to Christmas logistics and factors, I have spectacularly failed to see any of County's last three games against Franchise, against Bromley and against Walsall. So I'm going to be asking the questions today and listening instead to the reflections of people who know what they're on about, because I'm joined by, well, first of all, a man who needs no introduction, but he'll get one anyway. Chair of the Supporters Trust, occasional voice on the pod and all-round good egg, Amber Arnie Bartlett. Hello to you, Amber Arnie. How are you?
Hi, Ed. Yeah, all good. Wishing compliments of the season to everybody.
Good to have you back. And another occasional voice who pops up during match diaries or whose name gets mentioned in dispatches, but who I don't think has ever appeared on a proper panel recording, is Dave Rogers, a.k.a. Dave Alltudion. Croeso o'r podlediad go iawn, Dave.
Diolch yn fawr, Ed. Nadolig llawn, pawb.
Nadolig llawn i ti hefyd. And finally, a man who's only appeared once, I think, but always talks good sense on social media, earning him the nickname of Wise Dan from the pod crew. It's Dan Grace. Welcome back, Dan.
Cheers, Ed. Good to be on.
So let's get straight onto business. Later on, I want us to zoom out and talk a bit about the three games as a set and what we've learned from them, what needs to change, and the broader context of the season. But let's start by going through the three very different games that we've had, starting with that surprise 6-3 win over Franchise on the 21st of December, with the dam bursting after a prolonged goal drought in the weeks that had preceded it. We started with Jeffcott and Camwer and Spellman up top, with Hudlin on the bench. I was listening on BBC Radio Wales, and Jason Terry made the case for Hudlin not being our plan A as we move into January. And he was also impressed by Kieran Evans in the holding role, which I thought was interesting. And yeah, he said it was the best football he's seen played by any team this season, which was high praise indeed. So, I mean, Dave, did that tally with your reading of the game? What did you take away from it?
Yeah, it was one of those bizarre games. I think once a season, County turn into the greatest football team in the world, but it's only for 90 minutes, or, actually in this case, possibly only for 45 minutes. But the first half was ridiculous. Like we just looked unbelievable. Franchise helped us. They didn't seem to alter how they were playing, whatever, and they were exactly the type of team that County want to play against. Trying to play all this sort of neat passing on the floor, where, we tend to be awful against your Bromleys, who are full of 6'4" units. But it was just one of those games where everything went right from the off. I took my mate, he's not a County fan, and I took him, and after about 20 minutes, I looked at him, I just said, I haven't got a clue what's going on. Like, it was just that good. Jeffcott played really well in a kind of understated way, whereas like a lot of people wouldn't have noticed him, but I definitely think he helped Spellman and Camwer to thrive in that game, just by being sort of a different sort of forward to having a big man up there. It was one of those, I can't remember the possession stats, but I don't think we had that much possession in comparison with some other games where we have like 67% possession and one shot. It was almost back to, like, the stats were like Coco Ball. It was like 40% possession, but 15 shots and 10 of them were on target. Sometimes you walk out of a football stadium and just go, that was amazing. I really enjoyed it. Like, even when it started getting a bit edgy, when they got it back to 5-3, just a really enjoyable game of football. And I walked out with sort of a sense of inevitability about what would happen at Bromley, because there's no way they would have been that good 2 games in a row.
I mean, you do just get one game like that a season. It was Morecambe last year, wasn't it? Where, like I say, every chance goes in, and if you can come away with anything from it, then great. You can come away with 3 points, and so much the better. What about you, Dan? I mean, we'll perhaps talk about that bigger point about our different experiences of playing against the footballing sides, where maybe we don't get so much possession, but we can match them a little bit more when it comes to taking chances, versus playing the kind of brute force teams like Bromley and Walsall, where maybe we need a different approach. But in terms of that game against Franchise, like, what were your takeaways?
Yeah, I think similar to what Dave was saying, it just felt like everything was going right for us. I do think there's definitely something in us matching up better against certain teams than others. So Franchise is a great example. I think when we can pass the ball into our midfield and start playing, and like Kieran Evans was a great example. As soon as we got him on the ball, he has that ability to. He almost reminds me of like Josh Sheehan in his early days. He's that player now who's there to try and take the ball off the defenders and get us going. And we'll probably talk about it a little bit more in the other games where we didn't match up so well to Bromley and to Walsall. But I think a lot of the comments that I hear when we're not playing so well is, they're just passing it sideways along the back four. I mean, I may be wrong, but I think what they're trying to do there is find the angle to get us into players like Kieran Evans, into Morris, so that we can get playing. And Franchise just kind of sat off, I thought, a bit, and it just allowed us to pass it into our midfielders and Evans and Morris. I think Campbell was really good running in behind, and we were able to play those balls over the top that perhaps we weren't afforded the space to do against Bromley and MK. So yeah, that was a big thing for me. I was a little bit nervous, I got to admit, when they made it 5-3. I'm sure we were all a little bit jittery, but yeah, it was a great day, and I'm sure your mate Dave will be you'll be able to bring him back over on your parade again, but you just have to warn him it's not like that all the time.
The other thing that struck me listening at home is that it sounded like it was a much needed, more than the sum of our parts performance. You know what I mean? That, like, we've had a lot of games where, it's not necessarily been one individual player hasn't performed. It's just been that collectively things haven't clicked, whereas it felt as though in that game, like Dan said, things clicked. The runs were coming off, the passes through to the runners were coming off, and everyone played, like I say, more than some of its parts. When you saw kind of Jeffcott and Spellman in the starting lineup, did you go, ooh, are we trying something different? What's the plan? I don't know. What was your kind of reaction to that?
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure kind of what to expect. I guess just the way that his season has gone, Jeff got that everybody seems to understandably have a bit of a downer on him. So, but genuinely, it was one of those days where we played like Brazil, and it's not very often that we can say that, and just everything clicked from the first moment. With Bryn Morris rifling that left foot kind of shot into the top corner, because everything that could go right seemed to go right for us. We looked like we had loads of energy as well. So when we pressed them and took the ball off them, we managed to get people forward and into the box and into dangerous situations, and then, do the most difficult bit in football, which is actually converting those chances into goals as well. And it's definitely not very often that you say as a county fan that, we scored 6 and that didn't flatter us. We were just kind of everything clicked. Bobby had a great day where, he was able to turn those kind of that talent into end product. And that moment, that the bit that really did it for me is his final goal with that kind of outrageous reverse pass from Glennon, which, you could never get fed up of watching that back. It just, everything went right. And I was really, really pleased for Jeff. I know he still hasn't got the monkey off his back around actually scoring, but the reception that he got, leaving the field there, was brilliant and hugely deserved, because he held the ball up really well, played other people in, and was a huge contributing factor to bringing all those kind of what are sometimes disparate parts together. So I thought he was hugely influential in the game.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me neatly onto the trip to Bromley, because we all went into Christmas with a smile on our face, a big thumping win, and feeling optimistic for what might follow. And then, Boxing Day, we were brought crashing down to earth with a bang after that 5-2 defeat. And again, I wasn't there, and some of you were, but it looked odd to me that when things had finally clicked and when we had put in one of those more than the sum of our parts performances, we didn't stick with the same starting 11 and try and get a little bit of consistency. And Jeffcott, who, like you say, was the man who stood out after a frustrating 12 months for him, stood out with a really good performance, was dropped to the bench, and we reverted to Hudlin in the starting lineup, which, inevitably means we play a different way. Was that a surprise to you, Dan, that we made that change?
Yeah, I was surprised, and I think probably if he went back, Jardine would change it and would probably start Jeffcott instead. But it was interesting listening to his post-match press conference where he did say that he started Hudlin because he was worried about Bromley's height. And you can kind of understand the thinking there, like starting Hudlin didn't work because we were really undone by set pieces. But
three cheap goals conceded from corners doesn't suggest that whatever they've been working on in training in the build-up had come off.
Brilliantly positive mindset, isn't it? I'm going to start my striker because he's best at defending corny.
We are though a team, I think, that are with Brennan and Baker at centre back. When we come up come up against a team like Bromley, they must be licking their lips as soon as they get a corner, because I do really like Brennan and Baker, and I think we've got a centre back partnership there that we'll hopefully be able to build on going forwards. But we're just not the tallest team in the world at the moment. Like we have, when you think we've got like Kieran Evans in centre midfield and our two wingers, Glenn in the left back, McLaughlin, we have lots of small players in the team. So yeah, it was never really going to match up well. But a lot of the time, I think the really frustrating thing was that they were free headers as well. It wasn't like there was a challenge in the air or anything like that. We just didn't cope with it very well. But yeah, I was surprised to see Hudlin start, but you could maybe understand his thinking given how big a team Bromley were.
Yeah, I do think of all the criticisms of Nelson, this perhaps is the one that is most valid. I get that he likes to manage players' minutes, especially in periods like this where the games come at you thick and fast. But to me, common sense just dictates if you've come up with an 11 and an approach that's clicked after months and months of frustrations, just stick with it and give the players the chance to really fuse that kind of connection and that galvanize that momentum that has kind of brought you to that point. I don't know, what did you think, Arnie? Because you were another one who made the long trip down.
Yeah, so I mean, it was, they say it's the hope that kills you, don't they? We went there with kind of real expectations after playing like Brazil and ended up playing a bit more like Braintree, I think, for that game. But it was, we knew what we were going to get with Bromley, and I think that was probably disappointing. A typical old school League Two side, and they properly bullied us, and we never got to grips with their set pieces in particular. I mean, they were genuinely, they looked huge. And their set piece delivery was really good as well. So you could see why Jardine went for Hudlin. We put him near post, and they basically bypassed him every time it went either kind of the penalty spot, kind of middle of the goals or far post. Their delivery was really good, and yeah, it looked like we were trying to do zonal defense from corners. And we just couldn't stop them. We just didn't own it. We weren't strong enough and brutish enough to boss those areas of the box. Yeah, it was really weird the way we set up as well, because everybody thinks, well, we've just gone one up top with Hudlin, and we ended up getting really split. Where at times it felt like we had 4 or 5 up front, so that when we were playing it, when we had possession, playing it across the back, we emptied midfield, and then there was nobody to play passes into, nobody kind of dropping off and playing those kind of false 9, false 10 positions. And I think, Ollie, the tactics truck kind of dissected that pretty well. We got really split, and we were, other than for about 20 minutes, once Kai Whitmore came on and him and Kieran Evans really kind of brought some energy and intensity into the game, we were a really poor second.
I mean, again, that for me is a good reason to try and stick as far as possible to a settled 11, even if you're risking players in terms of minutes, because you then reduce the risk of that split. Because you're right, we aren't usually playing with one up front. It's much more dynamic than that, but it needs the players to have that instinctive knowledge of who else is going to make the run, where are they going to be, if that happens, who's staying back, who's making the runs off. And at the moment, when it's going wrong, when that's the stuff we conspicuously are not doing. And yeah, that feels like one of the problems.
I think Bromley were a really, really good League Two team, and I think a lot of teams will probably look at Bromley and maybe not give them the respect they deserve. They were really good out of possession, and they're only just outside the playoff places, I think, at the moment. But I think coming up against sides like that, they were the complete opposite to MK Dons, and I thought they really were like front foot. They reminded me of some of our the best teams we had under Flynn. They did play direct, but out of possession, they pressed so high. So when we did try to pass through the thirds a little bit, like we were doing against MK Dons, and I think this is why we look so split, like Arnie was saying, is because they pressed us so high. We were not good enough on the day to play through them, and that is something I think we need to get a bit better at, because Jardim's not silly. I don't think he just looks at it and is like, oh, we got 70% possession today. That was absolutely brilliant. It is about having possession in the right areas. And if 90% of our passes are along the back line, he's going to be just as frustrated with that, I think, as everybody else. So I think Bromley were a good team, and I think we need to get better at playing through teams like that if this is the style that, we seem to be wanting to play now going forwards.
I mean, I just wonder with Bromley. Obviously, I wasn't there. I was taking in the delights of the recreation ground in Aldershot on Boxing Day because we were visiting family. But I think everybody knows that Bromley are very good at set pieces, and you've made the point before, Ed, about with signing young academy players, sort of higher level academy players, but the teams up at that level really don't deal with balls lumped into the box. And for me, it was crying out for someone like Clarkey to play and just have a bit of experience in it. And I love Brennan and Baker. Like, I really think they're both excellent. But I was sort of looking at that game and going, we haven't really got any grizzled old pros who are used to fighting for their mortgage payments. And Clarkey is one like that. And maybe it could have been a game for him, knowing what was going to come. But I don't think he would have made any difference looking at the scoreline and the reports from the game. And, maybe he's not fit because he isn't getting a look in, is he?
He's one of the ones rumoured to maybe be on his way in January, and we might come on to that later. But on the kind of substantive point, I get that we want Brennan and Baker to play games of football together to form that partnership and to boost their confidence, but their confidence is clearly not going to be done any favours by shipping 5 goals because they're being asked to mark players who are that much taller and stronger than them. And I thought it was interesting. So this was the game that was followed by Jardim's comments about there is no plan B, which provoked some strong reactions. And it took me back to a conversation we had back in pre-season. What happens if this inexperienced side, coach very heavily on one specific footballing approach, hits a wall with it, and whether they are going to need more experience to draw on in games like the one at Bromley, like the one at Walsall, where we need to be a bit nastier. And where's that going to come from, especially now, Wilding's out for the season, possibly Morris and Clark might be on their way in January if the rumours are to be believed. That leaves us very, very lacking in nous. I don't know, Arnie, you've been around longer than the rest of us. What do you make of that?
Yeah, there's a bit of that, and that's always a worry. I guess we'll come on to the Walsall game, but I think if I'd been the Walsall manager watching us against Bromley, having a look at the videotapes of that, you'd have been pretty obvious where we'd have thought the weaknesses were and how we would try and exploit that. And that is pretty much the way Walsall play as well. They had Jamil Matt up front. They had some big lumps playing. It's quite a big crumb of comfort for me, I suppose, coming out of that game yesterday, was that even though that was exactly the way they were going to play, it looked like we were playing a Flinny side. Keeper hoofs it long all the time. First time they had the ball, Jamil Matt flicks it on. But actually, Baker and Brennan did really well. And for 70 minutes there, we were easily the best side, and they didn't really cause us a lot of problems. So I took a lot of heart from that. I thought they'd obviously kind of done a bit of soul searching, I think, and the manager had shown a load of faith in Baker and Brennan, and they came up with the goods. I thought we played really well, but for a couple of little mistakes and a couple of things, a penalty shout that didn't go our way, that could have looked very different as well. So at the end of the day, if he does want to play kind of possession-based football, you're not going to do that with Clark in the team. because sides will press that much harder and you'll end up just going to nick and playing hoofball. So I think he's sticking by his principles. And I was really heartened by the way that they stood up to a big, very good Walsall side yesterday for the vast majority of the game.
From a distance, and again, listening to the radio, we lost 2-0, but the second goal was, right at the very last kick of the game, I think it was. So we lost narrowly. I think we can say that safely, to a side who are not only top, but I saw yesterday the points prediction prophet on Twitter has them down to finish the season around 105 points. So losing narrowly away to a side who are expected to win the title at a canter does not on paper look like a result that should give us, more than a sort of passing pause for thought. But there seemed to me a lot of vitriol and anger about the performance. I mean, you were there, Arnie was there as well. What was the difference? What was I not hearing on the radio that you were getting in the ground?
I think if you just take the scoreline, then it doesn't look. It was a better performance overall, I thought, than Bromley. But what I think is really kind of frustrating at the moment, and this isn't just Walsall for me, it's not just Bromley. We're quite a poor side going forwards at the moment. And it's hard. I think it's hard to get excited about a team when you're not creating many chances. I mean, we did narrowly lose to Walsall, and I thought first half we matched them really, but we had 4 shots in the whole 90 minutes. Not many teams are going to win many League Two games where they have 4 shots. And we've had a few of those this season. So I think like the Notts County game, they had something like 6 or 7 times the amount of shots we did when we drew up there. So I think the frustrating thing is that we are consistently not creating too many chances. And that's I guess is the worrying thing. I think the MK Dons game maybe kind of masked that a little bit because now we've got a 6-3 kind of thrown in there, but I think for quite a long period of time we have had issues going forwards, and I think that's what people are probably frustrated the most about, to be honest, because whether you're keeping the ball or whether you got 70% possession or 30% possession, if you're not creating chances and scoring goals, it's hard to get behind.
Yeah, we looked good in the defensive and middle third, and then we couldn't quite get the kind of the killer pass. And there's a little bit here around, I have some sympathy. I thought we played it really well kind of down the channels, and that we brought Bobby in really well, and a bit less sure about Spellman. But I thought we did really well with Bobby. But then he's trying to pick out 1 or 2 people at most in the box, which is really hard because they're outnumbered. And just a little bit around those where a couple of times we had chances to try and play people in from a bit of an angle, and we hit defenders or we overhit the pass. So it's just that little bit of quality in that final third, I think, is where we really struggled. But there were huge positives. I thought Kieran Evans and Kai Whitmore, Kieran Evans in particular, I thought was phenomenal yesterday. And Shane McLaughlin, he's made a real difference for us, I think, particularly in terms of shoring us up defensively, but he's also more of a threat going forward. But we just didn't manage to turn anything into a real clear-cut chance. So that's definitely the area, as well as kind of defending corners, I think that Nelson will be needed to try to work on the team with.
One other thing I want to ask about, and I'll ask you first, Dan, is I saw for the second consecutive game some disquiet on social media about Nelson Jardim not coming over. I don't think he came over at all and applauded the fans at Bromley, and by all accounts yesterday he was sort of at the back of the bunch and not necessarily kind of engaging with what fans were saying, whilst equally I gather that there were some words exchanged between fans and some of the players. Again, I wasn't there and you were, but what happened and what's your kind of take on it?
I think at the end of the day, a manager not coming over and applauding the fan, it just doesn't look great. Like, I don't think it's a massive deal, but it doesn't look great, and it is frustrating when you've travelled like the length of the country and the managers doesn't come over to like thank you, and it just looks at the other strange thing as well for me about it is he didn't come over at Bromley, which I thought was a bit weird, but then you kind of think maybe he's just frustrated about the performance, and he's got a lot. He's obviously, as a manager, he's got a lot on his mind. But then at Walsall, it was kind of almost worse because he just looked detached from the whole team, and I don't think that's the case at all. The way the players seem to speak about Jardim's football, everyone seems to be buying into it, but it just doesn't look great. So to me, it didn't make a massive difference, but I just think it's such an easy kind of win to come over and clap the fans. To not do it just seemed a little bit strange, that's all.
It's one of those where the grief you get for not doing it is worse in some ways than the stuff you might get thrown at you if you go over and you do it. If you front up, some people will have a go at you, some people will defend you, but at least you're seen to be engaging with it.
Yeah, well, particularly for the Walsall game, the players all came over and they stood and applauded for ages, and that was the coaching staff as well. So you had Pipey there, you had Mark O'Brien, and you had Nelson there. They stood on about the 18-yard line, which is not unusual when you've got to come and do it at kind of one end of the ground. And they got a really good reception. So I didn't pick up any of the kind of any arguments or anything like that. They got cheered by the crowd. We just lost 2-0 for a second kind of away trip. The crowd got behind them. I didn't see anything kind of unexpected, and I thought the reception that the players and the coaching staff got was really good, and the rapport with the fans was really good there. Bromley, yeah, okay, but we've just had an absolute pasting there, and that's nobody wants to really come and acknowledge it, and yeah, that's a real tough one. But again, I didn't think it was anything particularly untoward or unusual given the circumstances.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think with for Nelson, he's obviously growing into being the main man, and he's following someone as whether you liked him or not. Cocker was an incredible figurehead. Like he just seemed to know what to say to get everybody on side, and that, I think Nelson probably needs to grow into that role a bit more. The other thing is, some people might know I work in professional sport, a different sport to football. Football is my release, but after games when your team's lost and everybody's in a bad mood, it's very easy for a number of people to be vocal, and it sounds like that's everybody, whereas actually it might just be sort of 20 or 30 people who are incredibly annoyed after a team's performance, but it might not be the majority. I don't know. I didn't go to either game, but I haven't, from where I stand on the terrace, I haven't really noticed any grumbling about him yet, personally.
I mean, the other thing, and Dan's alluded to it, is the players do seem to be behind him, and that we've got no great insights as a podcast, but we've got one or two sources, and the one or two sources that we have tell us that the players are very much behind him and his coaching approach, and there's no reason for us to disbelieve that. It is that thing, and we'll say it again, of when things slot into place like they did against Franchise, how can we then capitalize on that, keep the momentum going, and make sure we're playing like more than the sum of our parts in those games. And that kind of brings me on to, what I said we do at the start, which is kind of zoom out. And I've already, just in terms of context, talked about the points per games prediction for the season has, Walsall top on 105 points. Interestingly, it had us finishing 17th on 52 points. And I'd be interested to know whether that feels about right to all of you. I also had a look just before we came on the call, and after 22 games last season, we were in 17th position on 26 points. This year, we've now played 22 games and we're in 18th position on, drumroll, 26 points. So we're exactly where we were basically this time last season, in a season that was fine. Tell me what your views are of where we find ourselves and what your expectation is for the season as a whole. Are we higher or lower or about the same as where you'd expected? Arnie, you can go first.
Yeah, so I probably think we're about where we'd expected to be. We've rehearsed plenty of times before. Huge change of personnel over the summer, loads of new signings. Obviously, new coach looking to play in a very different way, and let's be honest about it, still with a really low budget. So I think this kind of Christmas week it's been a real curate's egg, which is I think what our season has been like all the way through so far, that we've been really inconsistent. I think it's worth remembering as well, I think we've got quite a high percentage of home games left, that we've played quite a lot of away games against quite a lot of the top teams. So let's not kind of lose sight of that as well. And what we need to do is to kind of try and take some of that momentum at home. We always talk about it trying to turn Rodney Parade into a bit of a fortress. That's what you need to do. Anything you can pick up on the road then is a bit of a bonus. But I'd say we're pretty much where I would have expected us to be, given all the that set of circumstances of lots of change and realistically a pretty low budget still.
I would say back in August, the most optimistic version of me, which doesn't really exist when it comes to watching sport, would have said 18th. So we're doing better than I thought. I spent the summer trying to work out, who the crazy teams were going to be that were going to save us, and it was kind of like Morecambe looking a mess and Accrington looking a mess. I didn't anticipate Swindon being quite as crazy as they are, but I was firmly in there. If you'd given me 22nd at the start of August, I would have taken it. So to be sitting here reasonably comfortable. That said, I've got real trepidation about Morecambe, but I think we're doing better than I thought we would. We've had some really good performances. We've had some stinky performances. The one thing I didn't think we'd maybe be able to do is properly shithouse some away draws, and we've done that. So I love the Notts County draw, which, basically we offered nothing in that game. But to actually, see it out and get a 0-0 draw, I kind of love that. So if we were to get more points than last season, this season, I think that would be a great achievement, and we could all be pretty happy with that. I wouldn't be saying that in 3 years' time. I'll be expecting us to be doing a lot better in 3 years' time. But for now, for year one and a complete change in how the club's trying to operate, I think it's going reasonably all right for me.
I'm probably a little bit more negative, I suppose, about the draws at like Notts County, where I can fully appreciate the side, a battling draw, when the other team's on top. I can see the positives in that. I just do have that little worry still at the moment that before that MK Dons game, we did quite consistently, to me, put in some. We were often were second best in a lot of games, I thought, and we were perhaps getting points that we maybe didn't deserve to be getting. So if we stay where we are, then I would be more than happy taking that and watching the style of play evolve. I still do have a couple of glances though to the relegation zones every now and then, just to make sure that gap is still there, because I do think I think Carlisle are 23rd at the moment. They've got American owners. They already, I know, are lining signings up for January. They agreed one the other day. So I don't think the bottom two at the moment is going to stay the bottom two come the end of the season. So I'd like to see us make that gap a little bit bigger. But yeah, I'm with the other two. If this was where we finished, I'd be more than happy.
And we've already mentioned Morecambe, so we've got those two big home games coming up now. AFC Wimbledon on Thursday night, Morecambe on Sunday afternoon, before we get the best part of a fortnight off to recover before we go to Port Vale. My question to the three of you is, what needs to change ahead of those two big home games so that we can take maximum points? Dave, I'll come to you first.
It's a bit of a bizarre one, because I'd look at it and I'd go, looking at how our season's gone, probably nothing needs to change against Wimbledon. They're a decent team and will probably suit how we want to play, how we like to play. I can see us doing all right against them. Where it needs to change is Morecambe, who will, if you look at Morecambe, I mean, they're bottom of the table, but if you look at their away record, it's not that bad at all. They've got a manager who I imagine none of us can stand, but is very capable of organising a team to go and put in a hard working away performance when you've got 20% of the ball and nick a 1-0. So I think it's, I can't remember which of the lads said it, but Morecambe, I just want to see us pepper their goal with shots. I can see that game just being us having loads of ball and not many shots. And then, probably Scouse Lewis bending a free kick in at some stage, and then you're massively up against it. I went to Morecambe up at their place in August, and we didn't deserve to win that game. So please, against them, can we just get a load of shots in, largely pointless ones from 25 yards that are unlikely to go in, but just look like we're trying to shoot.
I think we just need to be better at finding, your Kieran Evans, Brendan Morris if he was to start. I think we just need to be a bit sharper when teams press us personally. That's what I'd like to see us be a bit better at. And obviously, it would be nice, like Dave said, to create a few more chances, because I think that's where we've been lacking lately. And hopefully sort out defending corners, because Wimbledon and Morecambe, I think, are pretty good from set pieces. I know they've got both teams have a couple of big lads, so we need to practice our defending corners, I think, ahead of those two.
First goal kind of is always kind of crucial. I can't see any of those games being particularly high scoring. So yeah, probably everybody now needs to head down the bookies to put on a high scoring goal fest. With me having said that, look, starting lineup very much kind of plan A. I would say I'd really like to see Kai Whitmore and Kieran Evans getting as much game time as we can and as much time on the ball, and just trying to get out those kind of killer passes and a few more bodies into the box. It was really interesting. So we talked a little bit earlier about not having a plan B. Well, we kind of reverted to plan Z, I think, kind of at Walsall, where, we made a number of changes there, brought the big man Hudlin on and the wee man Cagbo on, and Kyle Jameson. And then you end up with no service. So we bizarrely took Bobby Camwer off to bring Jameson on. And the only touches of the ball I think that Jameson had were wide out on the left wing. And he might be many things, but he's not a left winger. So I can trust your principles there, and let's go with plan A, get the first goal, and defend properly when we need to.
Well, in a second, I'm going to ask you all as well for your priority for the January transfer window. But before I do that, I asked the same question I just asked you about what needs fixing before those two home games. We put it out to listeners on social media, and so we'll go through a few of those. So let's have a look. Dan Williams, always a sensible cove, said James Clark needs to come to the centre of defence. We're crying out for experience, know-how, leadership, and a bit of shithousery. Ollie said, I think we're too static when we've got the ball, no one moving to provide options. Walsall stepped up in the second half and cut out passing routes. No one's leading the line convincingly either, an area that needs addressing. No shame in losing at Walsall, though, they're a good side. Elsewhere, Alex, UT County, said 3-5-2, Clark at centre of defence, and please for the love of God, Clark at centre of defence. And then on Blue Sky, let's have a look. Di Evans is another one calling for a back three with Baker, Brennan, and Clark. Meanwhile, Jack Rowlands on Blue Sky, Jameson and Morris in defence. So there seems to be a consensus that we need a bit more experience in defence, possibly a bit more aerial ability. So some food for thought there. So with that in mind, what do you three think? Quickfire round, your January priority, and Arnie, I will start with you.
So I'd really like to see Glennon able to push forward a bit further. So I think a left back, and I am still very attracted to someone to play that kind of holding role in midfield to protect a back four. I still think I like us playing as a four, but yeah, and somebody that can score lots of ugly goals would be brilliant.
I think we need a number 10. I think with Wildig's injury, we're pretty light there. I was hoping that Whitmore might be, the man to play there, and he looked really good in August. And I know he's had a tough injury, so hopefully he can still play well for us there. But I think we do need another number 10 just to link the midfield and the attack, because I think that's one area that we struggle with at the moment.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Aaron Wildig replacement, I think, is vital, and obviously a 30 goal a season striker. But I suspect what will happen is Hudlin will go back and someone else will come in on loan, and that'll be about it.
That's not very Christmassy. I was looking for something more uplifting than that. Before we finish, there is just time for you to do your shout out and beats. Dan, you can go first on this one.
Yeah, so I've got a beef. It's probably like a little bit controversial, but I know we all obviously pay our hard-earned money to go away and watch Curate, but especially at away games, I noticed a couple of comments from our crowd that I don't think are like completely helpful. So we had one instance at Bromley the other day where we were keeping the ball, the defence were passing the ball side to side. Someone had a go at them for passing the ball side to side. And then they launched it forward to Hudlin, and they had a go at them for playing a long ball. And I just think like they can't win then. So, so I would just like us to maybe be a little bit more considered sometimes in our shouts from the terrace. And a shout out probably, and this is a bit of self-praise, but why not, to everybody who did all 3 games over Christmas, because it's obviously a lot of time, a lot of money, but and a lot of goals conceded, but it was it was still worth it. So yeah, they're my 2.
Well done, and well done to you guys who you've all managed a lot more games than I managed over that period. And I've got to ask as well, Dan, what was the away end like at Bromley? Because that was the one where we had all this bus with tickets and people with loyalty points needing to apply. Was it worth the scramble for tickets?
It was a throwback to some of the Conference and Conference South stadiums. I loved it, but I'm just glad it wasn't raining. If it had been raining, we would have been absolutely drenched. So yeah, perhaps not the most glamorous, but it was a bit of a throwback, so I quite enjoyed it.
Good stuff. Arnie, you can go next. Shout out some beefs.
So shout out to the person I think is going to be our real kind of cult hero. So Luke Jeffcott for sticking with it, and just the way that he has performed in those the franchise FC and Walsall games, and just the reception that he got and that he gave back to the crowd as he was kind of leaving the field. So yeah, really looking forward to that first goal to get that monkey off his back. I think that'll be the biggest celebration that we have all year. And then I'm in a bit of a bar humbug mode here, so I've got a few beefs if I can. So I have a beef with Liverpool. So we do a once in a decade performance to beat franchise FC 6-3, and you go home, and then Liverpool go and do exactly the same thing to Spurs away from home. So yeah, bar humbug to them. Those people that come up with the kind of Christmas fixture lists and think it's appropriate to send us on a 4-hour road trip to Bromley on Boxing Day. Wouldn't mind having 5 minutes in a room with them. Stadium announcers who can't be asked to acknowledge how many away fans have turned up. They thank the home support for rocking up, but don't quote how many away fans have come. So that's definitely something that we do really well at Rodney Parade, and we should keep doing that. And then finally, those people who've forgotten the true meaning of Christmas, they need to remember that friends and family are not just for Christmas. They can be visited any time of the year. So they don't need to be on the road when us football fans are trying to make those long trips. So I think somebody ought to be thinking around some kind of a curfew for non-football traffic, and or some sort of a bus lane to get football fans to grounds much more effectively.
Good stuff. Some excellent ones in there. Dave, you can have the final word.
Yeah, actually, just to go on what Arnie said. So I was at Aldershot v Woking on Boxing Day, and there's 5,500 people there because obviously 10 miles down the road. I was talking to a Woking fan, and I think they've got Maidenhead on New Year's Day, which again is not that far apart. So if the conference can sort it out, it drove me right when the fixtures came out and we had Cheltenham on the first day of the season. It was just like, why is that not a Boxing Day? It's not too difficult to figure out. My shout out. So my first one will go possibly to Arnie and the supporters club. I don't think anyone can underestimate the role that the club have had in my lad's life, and his little spitty Christmas card that dropped through the letterbox genuinely was more excited about than most of his presents. And that got all of our Christmas cards just stuck up on the wall, but that one is with my Christmas card on the mantelpiece. So just those little things that for what is effectively a small club, and I think with County, it's very obviously very focused on the Newport area, and we don't live in Newport, but they do those small little things so well with the kids, and you see so many kids at Rodney Parade, and I think it's brilliant. So just everyone just keep doing that, keep engaging with the young people. And my other shout out would be to the Rodney Parade crowd. Again, like Arnie said, Jeffcott had a really good game against franchise, and I think everybody sensed that it was a really massive moment, and that everybody clapping him as he walked down to the tunnel to get his ice pack or whatever it was. It was just really, really nice to see, and he had a smile on his face as he was walking down to the tunnel. And he's not a guy who's particularly enjoyed his football in any of the time he's been at County. So I just think everybody sensed that was possibly a big game. Hopefully it will be. If we're speaking in 3 months' time and he still hasn't scored, then it was nothing, wasn't it? But hopefully. My beef it's not a beef, but everybody told me that nobody's using Twitter anymore and everybody's using Blue Sky and Mastodon and things like that. So at the start of the season, I set up a Alltudion Cymru site, and it's got about 3 followers. So yeah, you're one of them, Ed. Yeah. So I mean, I don't use it as much, but I sat there doing the Walsall game and putting stuff out for absolutely no engagement whatsoever. So I just wonder if Blue Sky and Mastodon and things like that are just a little bit harder for people to navigate and find things. So I don't know if you're on there anyway, but please follow the account.
We will make sure we put links to all of your different accounts, Dave, into the show notes. And so anyone who wants to follow Newport County and Gymraeg can do so. Let's finish then on that nice upbeat note. Thank you, gents, for giving up your Sunday afternoon to have a chat. I look forward to speaking to all 3 of you again before the season is over. So thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Yeah, thanks, Ed.
Croeso. Thank you as well, all of you, for listening. We will be back with a wrap-up of the AFC Wimbledon and Morecambe games. So, yeah, keep yourself subscribed wherever you get your podcast from. In the meantime, do good in the world. May do you the world of good. And above all, as always, keep it county.